Good afternoon, good evening. How are we all? Welcome along. It's another Inspire and Be Inspired, our weekly motivational conversations, inspirational topics, the occasional life hacks as well. If you're joining me for the first time, my name is Andy Ward. I'm here live from the Costa Blanca in Spain, broadcasting to most of you fantastic people in the UK, and of course, anybody coming back and checking out the recording. Brum as Fuck is a great series of conversations that I've been having, and it's going to be my pleasure today to welcome two guests who are going to shed more light on the second city and quite interesting topics that we've got for you today, quite interesting avenues of conversation. So I will say before I bring them on, we are going to be deep in conversation, so it's going to be difficult for me to stop and address any of your comments, but I do invite you to leave any words, any messages, any memories that the two gentlemen evoke for you, and we will get around to them. I can see Jeff Jefferson is with us nice and early. How are you, Jeff? Big up my friend. He will definitely relate to a lot of this. Keep those there. Keep your fists there, Justin, because here we go. I go over to my friends and I say, welcome along to Mr. Justin Bond, Acid House, and Jez Collins. So here we are, Tuesday evening. Thank you for being here, gentlemen. Justin Bond is a gentleman that I've known for many, many years. I don't think there's anybody from the Birmingham clubbing scene that won't be aware of who Justin is. I'll say hello to you very quickly, Justin, and then I'll go and talk to Jez. So how are you, man? You good?
I'm really good, thank you, Andy. Thanks for inviting me on, mate.
Good to have you here. I want to say you have been a strong supporter of all these Brum conversations, and I know you've got a hell of a lot to talk about tonight, so I'll come back to you very shortly. I want to head on over to my second guest, Mr. Jez Collins, a gentleman who I know very little about, actually, so it's going to be my pleasure to peel back the layers, so to speak. Thank you for agreeing to do this, Jez. I understand that you're a gentleman who is definitely going to be able to give us a lot more information and put us right as far as Birmingham's music and art history is concerned. Is that correct?
I hope so. First of all, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I'm pretty jealous that you're over in the Costa Blanca and I'm in Costa Bearwood. And it's freezing here, but thanks for having me on. Really, I love the series and I love the ethos behind it. And we'll talk perhaps more about that as we go on. I know about 1% of Birmingham's music history and culture because I believe that the knowledge resides out there with people like yourselves, the people who do it, the people who contributed to it, and I'm interested in how we bring those people in to tell those stories exactly like you're doing, Andy, because actually the people of this city and the city itself has contributed so much to local, national and international music culture, and I can help fill in some gaps. Got my own history, of course, but yeah, I love what you're doing.
Okay, so let me begin by asking you to paint a little bit of a picture of yourself. I always say at the top of the show, we don't expect to cover people's life stories. We don't expect to get the full ins and outs, but a little background on yourself and how you came to have just this 1% of expertise. And yet, I think you've probably been a little bit humble there. So yeah, tell us about Jez Collins, how old you are, which will put a timestamp on your journey, and anything else you feel that's relevant.
Yeah, so I was born in 69, so 53 this year. Born in the Sorrento. If you know Birmingham, it was the major sort of maternity hospital where all the good people were born. That and Marston Green. Lived my first few years over in Tower Block in Castle Vale.
No way. I'm from Castle Vale.
On the Vale, on the 13th floor, I think it was, as a babby. And then when I was 1 or 2, I think we moved out over to Waite Green Road in Moseley.
Okay.
And then eventually to King's Heath. A bit like Adam Regan, come from an Irish family. And so the family had fragmented. My mum and dad were in King's Heath, as I say, so all Sister Lane's End, really. And they were separated when I was about 8, so about 1978, which was quite unusual for an Irish family. Catholic, brought a lot of discomfort to my mum. She didn't tell her, my nan, for years that She wasn't sort of, although, you know, my dad had moved out, not years, but, you know, a while. And then there's a big uproar because the church wouldn't let her have Holy Communion, all sorts. So it was a big thing at that time. And my dad went off to Moseley, so lived in Trafalgar Road, so 78, 79, as the UBs were there, and it was a really interesting, it still is an interesting place, but it was a real mixture of, you know, people in the who were, you know, into music and bohemian art, but also you had people, you know, selling the weed outside and cans of Red Stripe. A real great place. I loved it around Moseley. The rest of my family stayed over the east, so we're in Kitts Green, the Macadam, Tarcross, Chelmsley.
The infamous Macadam.
Macadam. It's still my two aunts still live on St Giles Road, so we're over there. Like the Macca is now a Lidl, you know. And but my formative years, really, I suppose, because my mum and dad had split up. My formative years was with my cousins. They, you know, had a tough upbringing with their dad. And so they'd come and stay with us to escape, you know, with my auntie. And then I'd go over there summers. And Shock was a couple of years old, well, 4 or 5 years older than me. So he hit punk about 1977, 76, 77. And that was it then. So, you know, I just remember great summers over in Garrett's Green. They were living at the time, actually. And just going into town, just listening to bands like the Buzzcocks and the Pistols and the Stranglers, and being exposed to all this amazing music. So that's my little bit of background. I know that, you know, you like to ask the sort of first memory. My first memory of music was a record shop called Cyclops in Piccadilly Arcade in the centre of town, which is now a coffee shop, I think. And I remember my mum and dad. I hope my mum never hears this, she'll kill me. My mum and dad were queuing for tickets for Bob Dylan. And unbeknownst to me mum, my dad's girlfriend at that time that we didn't know about rocked up. And I just remember being in the queue with all this patchouli oil. My mum had this long fiery dress on and, you know, long hair everywhere, in the queue going out onto New Street, queuing for Bob Dylan tickets and being excited. And then this hoo-ah happening. And I was about 4, 5, I think. So that's my early, and Bob Dylan's been through with me all through my life, from the good and the bad. So that's a little taster into the early years.
Okay, so that gives us an insight into Jez Collins. Thank you very much for that. I do like to make this as interactive as possible, so I will repeat again because people do jump onto the stream a few minutes after we begin. Please feel free to leave any messages for the guys, leave any comments of things that you relate to as you're watching people of the stream, and I will get around to saying hi to you at some point once the guys have finished talking. So shouts out to John Harris, also hi to Aid Wilcox. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to comment as well. I can see the comments here within a consolidated chat feed. Okay then, so Mr. Justin Bond, Jeff Jefferson. No, I can answer this question. Jeff Jefferson says, "Did you go to Castle Vale Comp?" But I was listening, and I know you said you left Castle Vale at about 1 or 2 years of age, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
So again, very quickly, a bit like Adam. I was quite academically clever, but hated school. So I went to Catholic schools over in Thomas Aquinas, over in Northfield, and then like a lot of guests actually that you've spoken to, just school wasn't for me. I wasn't for school, and I wanted to be a bad man, and I was never a bad man, and you know, got into the wrong crowd, and quickly found out that I was just kidding myself. But I left school when I was 15, so I got asked to leave one school, went to Archie's, and left when I was about 15, and went on a YTS, which we'll talk about a bit later on. Yeah, my cousins were over in Smithswood.
Okay.
Chancellorwood,
Bromford. Yeah, that's my neck of the woods there, from Castle Vale, Bromford, Chancellor, all them minutes. Right then, okay. So, Justin, as I think I know most of your backstory, but I do believe we need to give you the platform to introduce yourself. Actually, before we do introduce you and your backstory, because I did have a conversation with you, and I said that you've led such a colourful life. It's pretty impossible for us to try and capture all of that in the conversation we're about to have. But you wanted to draw reference to exactly where you are right now in life, right?
Yeah.
Before we begin.
Yeah, I mean, as many may know, as you quite nicely put it, I've led a somewhat colourful life, especially in probably the last 10 years or so. And nothing that I'm proud of, to be honest. I have been in the throes of addiction for probably the last 10 years. I mean, I've always been into drugs and drink and stuff from an early age, you know. But then I suppose over the last sort of 10 years or more, really heavily into alcohol and coke and whatnot. And finally now, at the wrong side of 50 years of age, I'm now in a what is commonly termed as a dry house. I've been to rehab again, and I'm now living in an assisted sort of situation in a nice house in Birmingham for recovering addicts and alcoholics. And that's in our homes. And I know that a few of the guys should be tuning in sometime this evening, so I'd just like to say hi and get that to one side and move on to the good stuff.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, you're on the good stuff right now, mate. Very commendable. So thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, so let's roll back. Let's pretend nobody has the faintest idea who Justin Bond is. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Justin Bond. There you go.
And make sure you keep talking directly into the mic because you're quite muffled.
You're still having problems with that, yeah? Is that better?
Yeah.
Very much like Jez. Went to Roman Catholic school. I was actually born in the same hospital, Sorrento's, Moseley. Lived in Moseley for a couple of years, mostly in Paul Green for a couple of years of my early life. And then we moved to Henley and Arden in Warwickshire on the way to Stratford. Lived there for 10 years. Mum and dad split up, you know, usual story. And then moved back to Brum with my mum in Sheldon. I lived in Sheldon for a number of years. Went to Sheldon New School for a while, got expelled from there. Went to St. Peter's Roman Catholic in Solihull. Didn't like that at all. Very much like yourself, Jez. Left at 15 to pursue other things. Obviously, there wasn't much work around at the time. Started a while. Well, actually, no, I did got some money out the what was it called? The Enterprise Allowance Scheme, was it, Jez?
Yeah. Enterprise Allowance.
I got out of them and started a market stall flogging second-hand clothes for a short time at the rag market. Because at the time, my auntie, my dad's sister, Rose, she allotted all the pitches in the rag market. So me and a friend got together and we got some bits and bobs and we were selling stuff down there. That lasted a short time. And then I ended up working in the clothes shops in town. So I worked in the Oasis Indoor Market for a while. Some of the fashion houses, Zip Menswear, Ciro Soterio, quite a few. Benetton, I think. I also worked at Folio 50 for Danny's brother, Chris, if you remember Folio. It was not in Mega Actives, although I used to shop in Mega Actives with the Ryan brothers. That's how I got to know those guys. But I worked at the store opposite the church.
Yeah, down on the hill on Digbeth.
Yeah. And I worked in there for a while as well. And I suppose from going clubbing, out and about and stuff, you know, like yourself, Andy, got to see the faces, blah, blah, blah. I was always buying music. Probably like yourself, Andy, because I do remember seeing you at the Powerhouse all days. And I remember the conversation we had in one of the interviews, probably 3 or 4 back, and you couldn't figure out how you was in at your age at that time. You weren't alone. I was there, and a lot of my friends were there. I know Nick Brotherson was there. I think you know him. A lot of the guys from Sheldon, Yardley, Your End, Bromford, that way, they were all in Paradise all days on Sunday as well. And we were only about 15 at the time.
Yeah.
Very cool. And I was always into the black music, you know. I mean, I started out very much, you mentioned Rob Johnson, good old friend. I was very much into the breaking thing, you know, buying the electro albums, into the casual stuff, you know, on the costs and, you know, the Deodora trainers and all that sort of stuff, you know. It was all about that for us as kids. Then I got into the graffiti. And it was funny because you had Devil on the other week. And we used to go watch those guys breaking in Canada Park as kids. And I used to do graffiti with Darryl Edwards, Mr. Glide. I don't know if you recognise that name at all. His name was everywhere. And sort of like, so I got into the graffiti thing. We used to go over to Wolverhampton and see Goldie. And he sort of took, he was a lot older than us, and he took us under his wing, you know, he'd take us painting with him and show us how to paint and stuff like that. And I just got into that, you know, from the electro into the hip hop, and the MC, the Public Enemy, that kind of thing. But I can't remember who it was. It was a family member from my mum's side. Had a lot of ska and stuff like that, you know, all the old 60s ska and that. So I was very much into that kind of thing as well. And probably much like yourself, Andy, I got into DJing from being the kid that had the records. You know, so I'd get asked to DJ at people's friends' house parties when the mum and dad were on holiday and that kind of thing, you know. And it just went from there, really, to be honest. I mean, my first ever, should we call it proper DJing gig, was at the Swan at Yardley. Remember that place?
Yeah.
Swan Market. That was my first ever gig. Obviously, it didn't go down very well at all. And I only got the gig because the guy that was DJing there, obviously as a young kid, I stood around the console watching him this time, really getting on his tits. So he just sort of like, you know, let me hang around there, you know, just to shut my mouth through it. And the one night he rang near my mum's flat where I was living on the Coventry Road in Yardley, and he'd got tonsillitis. He says, look, you seem to be into music, blah, blah, blah. You've got records. You keep telling me you've got records. You can cover my shift tonight. And that was it. I didn't have a fucking clue what I was doing at all, you know, at all. You know, I wasn't even using the mixer. I was taking the stylus off the wall, you know, and just left the crossfade with the centre, and I was just really dodging it. So that didn't go down very well. And then my first regular DJing gig was actually at the Black Horse in Aston.
Yeah. I used to knock about Aston all the time. I lived in Aston. I can't think where that is. The Black Horse.
Black Horse. Well, you've got the pot of beer, and then if you walk up from the pot of beer,
I can't even think where the pot of beer is. I'm sorry.
Costa Green, really.
Yeah.
It's more Costa Green than Aston.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got a regular gig in there. I think it was 1990, and I did that until the end of 1991, and we were playing sort of like Pop Elite itself, New Model Army, and then the indie dance thing sort of came as well. I was already into the acid house thing anyway. I mean, I was buying sort of like early Chicago and stuff from Frenchy at Summit, sort of like 86, I think, you know, when it first started to trickle in. So yeah, I mean, I didn't really get much of a chance to play that kind of stuff in the Black Horse, so I probably got lynched and fucking thrown out the top window. You know, so, but yeah, I mean, as the indie dance sort of thing started to come in, we could get away with certain tracks. But, you know, much like yourself, Jez, I was a bit of a chameleon because I was going to sort of like bars like 49ers and, you know, you mentioned like Coco and stuff, Andy, when Dick was on. You know, so I was going to all those things. I was going to Snobs. I was going to Willie's Teapot, which was at Folios. And then there was one down Race Street, which was a warehouse party. And that was about late 88, early 89. And that was like the first sort of majorly house event that I sort of went to. It was, I think it was about 89. And I used to go to Bonkers a lot. 49ers was my main group. Used to go to the Barrel Organ. We used to start off in the Barrel Organ. We'd get off the 50 bus and then go into the Barrel Organ, sink a few in there. And sometimes you'd see Lemmy in there. I don't know if you remember, Jez. You'd see Lemmy from Motorhead in there.
Yeah.
Quite regularly, actually.
Right, yeah, he was.
You know, you could see him. He'd sometimes have a drink, but he'd always buy you a JD or whatever it was. He was having one, you were having one. Yeah. You know, we'd sink a few of those. That was about 6 o'clock of an evening. And then we'd walk up through the market into 49ers and then just see where the night took us. You know, so I was a bit of a chameleon. I was doing the indie thing. So I was doing the Ship Ashore, Sinatra's was another one, West End Bar as well.
Right, I'm going to stop you there because you're starting to go down the route of trying to mention every single venue, every single thing that happened. But thank you for that enthralling, and you know, definitely we will sit down and just have a conversation separately at one point regarding all of that, because there's so many different scenarios, so many parties that we've spoken about. off air, so to speak,
Yeah,
that we both can't seem to piece together. But we'll come back to your timeline. What I'm keen to do, because we have Jez with us, I'm keen to hear about your views, because clearly you have a lot of great views and a lot of great insight as to why Birmingham is so influential, how it became so influential, and what you feel are some of the major turning points wherever. I mean, is there anything that you feel, just listening to Justin's story, not even trying to, relate to Justin's timeline, just generally about Birmingham itself, what are you moved to talk about?
No, there's a lot to sort of unpick there. I mean, like, very similar story to Justin's, that chameleon genre hopping, which I'm not sure sort of exists so much today. I'm old now, like you, don't go out clubbing, etc. But Birmingham for me, and you open the show with like the second city, and for me, it's like who wants to be second, right? It's my city. I've lived there for 53 years. I've been fortunate to live in Australia, New Zealand for a couple of years out and travel the world. And I always come back here and my kids go in. And it's a unique city. And I think its music is unique from any other city in the country. And I'll tell you for why that is. And we've sort of touched on it at the start of the show. There's been a continual popular music. If you think about popular music in its entirety, whether that's house or whether it's techno, whether it's jazz or whether it's pop, or whether it's banger, or whether it's reggae, whether it's ska, whether it's punk, whether it's metal, whether it's whatever sort of genre you want to think. This city has continuously had and pumped it out at local, national, and as I said earlier, international level. And the reason for that, I think, and the uniqueness for that is due to post-war communities. I think post-war, when we were rebuilding Birmingham, the Irish already had were beginning to be settled here. There's obviously the white, indigenous population, but the populations of Asia, South Asia, and from African and Afro-Caribbean communities who came to rebuild, who worked in the factories and worked in the NHS, who drove the buses, who built the roads, who worked in the shops. They lived and worked next to the indigenous population, the Brummies, for want of a better phrase. And it was cheek by jowl, and they lived and worked and played with each other. And that's not to say that any other city in this country hasn't got multiculturalism or diversity, because clearly it has. Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield, etc. And even London, I don't think that the communities were so entwined. Right? They did not work so closely or live so closely. And go to work so closely, and go to school so closely, and go out to play so closely. And for me, a little example of us, when we lived in sort of King's Heath, Moseley way, I'd be around Highgate and Balsall Heath, and a lot of my mates were black, a couple Asian, but mainly black, actually. My football team was mixed when I played for St. Anne's, which is a Catholic church, which had loads of black players in it. They weren't Catholic, right? But they were from that area. And other neighbours would be Asian. Right, and you'd literally hear the reggae bass lines from one side, you'd smell the curry from the other, you'd hear the rock or the punk or the folk, whether the music, Irish music from the house and the mill from us, and you couldn't help but just infuse or be infused by those sounds. And as I said, you'd have people, my father, father's father, etc., my mum's family would go and work in those foundries and those factories and in the NHS and on the buses. And so they'd work with black and Asian people, and they'd share stories, and they'd have a common ground. And I think, that would then come out within in our music and our food, actually. And as I said, you can't help but sort of osmosis, these things would come in. You would, in the 70s and 80s, you'd see, big rastas going to watch, I don't know, the Au Pairs, and see Jane, who's a 4'8", 4'10" woman on the bass line, dropping big dub lines. And they'd be going, what's she doing? She'd go to blues parties and pick up like the dub sounds or the reggae sounds. You'd have Asian youth wanting to find out more. They'd be listening to rock music, and they'd start to take their Punjabi folk heritage and start mixing that with rock and then you had the formations of Bhangra a bit earlier, actually, in the 70s. And so that's why I think this city is unique. And of course, I'm painting a very rosy picture of some utopia. There was racism, there was colour bars, people of colour. Then
I had to sit here and keep my mouth shut then, because I was going to say it wasn't all fun and games, was it?
It absolutely wasn't, and I don't want to paint that picture, but I'm talking about our music culture and why our music culture is what it is today, and how it's been for the last 50 or 60 years compared to other cities is because of that proximity. And what I think again, maybe I'm being naive, but I know you've talked about this with Jock about the hummingbird and and house music, particularly in Exeter, in the blues villa, which is true all over the country about football tribes. But you would not have found another firm like the Zulus in any other country, right? There is no question that would not have happened, that mixture of black and white. And that's because of the places like Castle Brum, of Chelmsley Wood, of Sparkhill, of Borsley, etc. Again, I don't want to paint some utopia that it was all sweetness and lights and we're all holding hands skipping down the street, because I know that's not true. And that's true for the Irish. I grew up after the 74 bombs, and just another, the dogs we had for years, and there's a lot of symmetry and association between black and Irish communities, or at least there was. But that's why I think this city, and I'll give one sort of example of that, really, to crystallize it. Undoubtedly, Birmingham was the seeds of heavy metal, with bands like Sabbath, Judas Priest, Zeppelin, half of Zeppelin being here. And you listen to Tony Iommi talk about it. He says, well, I worked in a foundry down in Aston and Handsworth, and, it was hot, it was loud, it was violent, it was noisy. I had to make the music that reflected that. So that's why we made heavy metal. I mean, of course, he cut the top of his fingers off and glued, plastic, the fairy tips to it, and detuned his guitar, and so that's where the sound came from. But he said, I had to make that music. That's my surroundings and my environment. Well, he was working next to black and Asian people, right? They were not coming out making heavy metal. They were coming out making ska and blue beat, or listening to ska and blue beat, or Punjabi folk songs, and then into Bhangra music. So this idea that your surroundings, influence your or there is one sound at any one time is a misnomer. And for me, the uniqueness of Birmingham, the difference of Birmingham, is actually in the how those communities have informed and listened to and taken on board and worked together. The things that you've talked about the jazz all dayers, I used to go to the Monty, again, I don't keep saying this about utopia, but I think we don't recognize it enough. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's given us a bit of a weakness that we can't have a defined sound. We can't have a Manchester. We can't have a post-punk Joy Division. We can't have a Liverpool's. We can't have the electronic from that might be associated with Sheffield. But I'll tell you what, we've got all that.
Yeah,
we've got all that and more. And we've got it all over the last 40 or 50 years, continuous. JK now, or let's talk about UB40. Again, I don't think a group like UB40 could exist in another city. That mix of cultures and ethnicities and people from those backgrounds. Someone like JK, it's slightly different, but with his, what's he got? Irish, Scottish, Yemeni, English. Some Pakistani, I think, heritage in him. For me, that's the beauty of this city, and we should be proud about that, and we should talk about it more. And that's exactly why we have people like yourselves who make such a great contribution to the city and its music culture.
It's such a it's enthralling to sit and listen to you to sum it up like that so beautifully. And you mentioned several times there, and then you shied away from using the word utopia. I am very romantic when I think about the glory days of, I call them the glory days. I mean, you can't romanticize any more than that, can you? About life in Birmingham in the 70s and the 80s. It was an amazing time, and so many different scenarios, so many different it's just fantastic. And you could just sit here chatting about all of the tales, and that's what we do try to recreate on a regular basis. But also, I think it is important, because we do need to state that people up and down the country will have the same kind of references that we're drawing on. But Birmingham is quite unique in its own way, isn't it? Without a doubt.
It's what, 1.2 million people, and with all respect to people listening in other cities, Yeah, I love Manchester. Again, I found out from your show that Jock's a fellow United fan. I'm a massive big Birmingham head. I played youth football for Blues, went to the Blues, but then and the weeks over, I got to United, so I'm actually a red, and I feel a cheat. But those cities, they aren't as big, and they might have pockets of it, but they haven't got this sustained living together. And I've had friends come back from visiting Manchester, Liverpool, and they go, God, I can't believe how white Manchester is. And I go, what are you talking about? Manchester's not white. It's multicultural. No. When you come back to Birmingham, it's completely, yeah. So there is that sense that, it is slightly different. And just before I shut up, and sorry, Jay, I want to point out that, I do look back, but it's all about, looking back to inspire the future. And I really wish I was like 18 or 19 now. My lad's going to come up to 18, because I think this city, potentially is probably more exciting than I can ever remember in terms of its music that's coming out of it.
Yeah,
There is some great stuff coming out.
Okay, we'll definitely put a pin in that comment, and we'll come back to that at some point. Okay, without shifting topics of conversation too much, but I do actually want to broach the two very separately. Justin, I'll come back to you then. Sitting listening to that, I'm sure you agree with everything that Jez has said.
Oh, totally, yeah.
What I would like to do with yourself, you are so much more than just one building on a corner on the outskirts of the city centre, but I do want to focus on that building on the corner. Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, roll back and think to where that story, the significance of that story begins, and how Bond's Nightclub came about.
Okay, well, something that came about over a series of years, to be honest with you. My dad had a very successful silversmith company in Jewelry Quarter with 3 factories. And I was, like yourself, going up the town, clubbing, blah, 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 this, that, and all that. And we had one of those old JVC stereos, Master Masters, whatever you want to call them, with a record deck that popped out the front of it.
Okay, I remember it, yeah.
And I would go in and help out with work in there from time to time if you needed the extra help, because I actually trained for a short time at BJA, Bitch Jewellers, in Jewelry Quarter, learning to make jewellery and whatnot. But it wasn't for me. I was more into the fashion and the music side of things, which I pursued for the rest of my life, to be honest with you. And I would take in tapes and albums I purchased. I'd be playing them while I was working. And I was telling the old man, come on, this is acid house, get on this, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And bumpy bump music, my dad called it. So, bumpy music, get it off. Let's have some Womack and Womack, which is cool. Anyway, I persuaded him to, his friend was a badge maker, also in the Jewelry Quarter. And I'd cottoned onto the smiley face thing pretty early. So I persuaded my dad to have a chat with his pal Roger, who was, at first, he was involved in bonds, but that was for about 6 months because he just couldn't get his head around it. It really wasn't for him at all. So he sort of left the building, as it were. But anyway, we persuaded him to make the tooling for smiley face badges. But we did very, very nice gold and silver plated smiley face badges, earrings, rings, with the eyes and the mouths actually punched out of the circles. And I went up and down the country to various boutiques, shops, etc., selling the smiley face badges. If I remember rightly, a guy called Simon Everett, who was Michael Ryan's part in his business after Bonds, which was the e-cigarette company he likes. He also had a pitch in Megaactive, and he was also one of the guys that sold our badges. Anyway, my dad thought it was a flash in the pan, and to an extent, the smiley face it had its time, as we all know. But my dad sort of cottoned on to it. It was starting to get somewhere, and obviously, he was starting to see the shift in music and so on, top the pops, you were getting people like, well, before Orbital, you had sort of Bomb the Bass and those kind of guys, and S Express, Mark Moore, bless him. And those kind of bands were starting to get onto the TV. So my dad started paying attention to this. And I was going into them on a Monday, sort of half cut and whatnot. So I've really been the weekend. I've been here, I've been to Manchester, I've been to Stoke. I spent a lot of time clubbing in London, actually. The Brain Club on Wardour Street, which was run by Sean McCluskey and Mark Wigan. I used to go to that regularly. And that's where I met Al Mackenzie, Witchmaster Morris, who I believe you are aware of, Jez. Andy, I'm not so sure if he would be. And people like that. And so my dad found an old disused social club, which was at the time in the 80s and I believe the 70s. And then it was a social club for workers of the MEB. And it already had a sprung dance floor in there, which was brilliant. So we did a deal with the MEB. That was in 1990. And then in 1991, once all the paperwork was done and all the rest of it, and the deal was done, we started to build on it. And obviously...
So just remind me again, how the conversation came about, oh yeah, let's open a nightclub.
Well, if you know me and my dad, which you do, I can't quite remember. So he actually came to me and said he wanted to open a club.
Okay.
Right? He didn't want to open a dance club at all because he thought it was a flash in the pan. He had an idea of opening a sort of like a cabaret club, like the Kings, which was
Danny Great Bar.
Yeah, you got it. And and that's fundamentally that's what he did. You know, he had the glitter band on and Susie Quattro and people like that. You know, in the first sort of like few months of the place opened. But he gave me the Saturday night there. And I booked Weatherall, booked all sorts of guys, you know, to play there. I had Left Field booked to play live, which they did. But 3 weeks before me actually running the Saturday night, he shifted me over to the Monday. So I had sort of like Andrew Weatherall DJing to like 20 people on a Monday night. I had Left Field playing a live gig to, I think, 80 people. So that ran its course after about 4 weeks, and that was that. And it really struggled. You know, he put these bands on, and they were quite successful in their own right. But as Jez will know, people of a certain age that go out to live gigs, you know, they will go watch the gig. Well, this was the culture then. They would go watch the gig. They would have a pint or two. As soon as that gig's finished, they're out the door. You know, and that went on for a few months, and I'd sort of fallen out with my dad for one of many times.
I was going to say, it wouldn't have been the first time.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time, no. I think probably for that this morning, if I remember right. And he gave me a call and he says, look, you know, I want this to come back into the club and work on, you know, what you initially wanted to do with the thing, you know, because it's not working for us and it could fold. So that's what I did. I can't remember where the idea of the club thing came from. It just sort of happened. And I think I was quite shocked at the time when he said, look, I want to open a nightclub. And I was like, hey, you know, what do you know about flipping within nightclubs? You know.
So did you have much to do with the sound install, the light?
Yeah. I mean, the sound was initially put in, but I can't remember the name of the company, but it was later added on by our good friend Sammy Diavlin and Phil from Deco Pro Audio, Deco Leisure, Dare Pro Audio, sorry. And they bumped up the sound in there for us, which was very much needed. My main thing with it was that the DJ console had to be in the centre of everything. You know, so the DJ could see the dance floor and see everything that was going on, so they could read the dance floor. So that was my main input with the layouts, to be honest.
Jay,
yeah.
Jay, sorry, was that because you'd been going clubbing and you'd seen what was going on in London and you thought that's the...
Because I'd sort of been DJing, not on a professional level in any way, but, you know, various places. And I was going up and down the country in like the Hacienda, great club, but the DJ console was up in the gods, you know. And I've been to clubs where it really worked and the vibe was good. Do you know what I mean, Jez? And everyone that I've been to that worked really well, was where the DJ was in front of the crowd.
Yeah.
The interaction was there. You know, and if the DJ could see something wasn't going right, they had the chance to turn it around.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's pretty much why I sort of insisted that it be put there, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Nice.
So we're talking about 91.
This was 91, yeah. I mean, we started the initial build in 91. As I say, we were very lucky to have the Sprung dance floor at the time. Jez might know more about this than me. We were led to believe it was one of only two still left in Birmingham City, because all the old places have been knocked down, and you know. Yeah,
I think the Hummingbird had one.
Yeah, I think the Hummingbird did. Yeah.
And there weren't many. The town hall by then, you know, I think they've got a Sprung one now, but they didn't have one.
No.
But maybe the one at the Bear.
The Bear would have done. Yeah, the Bear would have done.
Yeah, there weren't many.
No, there really weren't.
They make all the difference, don't they?
Oh, massively.
I mean,
especially when you get to our age.
Yeah.
I went to, just going off key slightly, I went to the Warehouse project in Manchester in December. It was Chemical Brothers, Justin Robertson, etc. I managed 20 minutes on the concrete, and that's going to sit down.
Really?
That's going to, I could really feel it. Really.
Dear oh dear. Okay, so take us back to 91 then, and your old man bringing you back in and saying, okay, so we need to make this work. So what was the next step?
Well, 91 was when we built it. It didn't actually open until December of 92.
Okay.
So we opened in December of 92, and the first night, funny enough, was Christmas Eve, and I'd spoken to Derm, Nick, and Lee Garrick at the shop. They came down and had a look at the venue and said, do you want to come and do something here? We've got this space anyway. They came back to us and they said, yes, they did. And they ended up doing Christmas Eve. So that was actually the first, it was the first dance night, definitely.
Okay, so you're talking about two of the Ryan brothers and Lee Garrick. Okay.
Yes. Well, it was three of them. It was all three brothers and Lee. And they did, and then Phil came into the picture. And it was Chuff Chuff versus Wobble.
Okay.
It was Eve 1992. And that was the very first sort of dance event, because my night was due to start sort of like the third week in January, which isn't, obviously in hindsight now I know that January isn't really a good time to start trying to promote a new night in a new venue. But obviously, you know, I know better these days. But yeah, that was the first event, and I don't think at the time the guys were. I mean, obviously, my dad had his own ideas with what he wanted to do with the club, and all this. He thought dance music really was a flash in the pan. And I don't think the guys at the time were confident enough. I mean, obviously, they had the Chuff Chuffs, etc., and they had the boat parties, as you know, on the 7. But I don't think at the time they were confident enough to launch a weekly thing. I mean, obviously, so after that, they did do a Silver Slipper at the Q Club, and the first one was really, really good. But then obviously, they had licensing problems and stuff. But we'll come to that and pick it further down the line. So when my dad asked me to come in and start putting the feelers out with friends and stuff, the first people I went to see were actually Lee Fisher, Jock, and Baxter, Mark Baxter. And I went into Pure Records and I said, look, this is my dad, blah, blah, blah. You know, we've got the venue. Would you be interested in doing something? And I think they sort of run the course with Better Way when it was at the Institute. And they weren't particularly doing anything. I know they did Better Way at a few places. And I think they did a few things at Snobs. In fact, I know they did. But they weren't really doing much. And I asked them if they wanted to come in. So we sat down and had a meeting with them. And they were interested in the idea, but nothing actually nothing became firm with that. So then I can't remember if we went to see them. We went to see Mark Partridge and Piers at Global Grooves. And this was just at the end of spring 93. And we went to see them down at the shop, and they came to the club and this, that, and the other. And fun became a thing. Now, fun, as we all know, was at the steering wheel.
Yeah.
But it was supposed to be at Bonds.
Okay.
And they had all the flyers done for it. It was flyers fun at Bonds, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. But then Carl and Barney got in the mix. They were doing Cream. And obviously, Carl and Barney had strong ties with old Sidney Taylor, bless him. Great old guy. And I think literally a week before they were supposed to launch at Bonds, they told us that they were moving to the steering wheel just like that, and they'd redone the flyers, and before we knew it, we didn't know what the hell was going on. They were in the bloody steering wheel, so we were still nightless as it was. So we started putting events on like Eccentrics, which was a Moseley-based night, which Jez will probably remember. I think it was at Moseley Dance Centre, but I do recall it being Circus Club. You might know better than me on that one, Jez.
I'm just trying to remember. Well, say the name again.
It was Aidan Keane and co.
I've been struggling to try and remember the dance because I used to go to the dance centre a lot. I used to love it.
So did I, yeah.
For the life of me, I mean, the only one I can remember is Brian Parsons and the Bongo Go Nights.
Yeah.
And I can't remember much.
So for sort of the first half of '93, we were sort of like hosting sort of a lot of the Moseley Club nights that were really good and popular in Moseley that fancied dipping their toes into town. So we had some really successful nights that crossed over from Moseley, and they were doing stuff in our place, and that went on for quite some time. And even after Miss Moneypennys started, they were doing sort of Friday nights and things like that. You know, I mean, as you know, we had Oscillate there for quite some time, which to be fair, is most definitely one of my favourite nights ever.
Yeah,
definitely. You know, I learned a lot there. I met a lot of really good people. You know, Paul Hartman from Orbital, Alex Patterson from the Orb, a lot of guys from abroad. You know, Biosphere, Children of the Bong, Charlie Hall, God bless him, from the Drum Club. You know, so I kind of immersed myself in that whole ambient dub kind of thing for a long time. I still love it now.
Yeah.
And they were such fabulous nights. You know, a lot of work went into those. You know, as I'm sure you know, Jez. But yeah, so that was that. So we had a stab at a better way, or whatever I think it was they were looking at calling it. Fun, which was supposed to come to Bonds and then didn't end up with the steering wheel. I then went to Jim, Mick, Derm and Lee, and they said, we've committed to the Silver Slipper, which was at the Q Club. And we were up in air. We did a few acid jazz nights with Lady Pillar, Magic Bus, and so on and so forth, but there was nothing concrete at all. There was no weekly kind of event. And then I was in Raphael's one night, and somebody said, "Oh, the Silver Slipper's gone. It's fucked. It's finished." You know, I think there was about 3 weeks in. So talks opened up again with the Ryans, and we went to see them again and said, "Look, you know, you've done the Silver Slipper thing. How about you come to us again?" You know, it worked at Christmas last year. Everybody enjoyed themselves. And to fill a club with house music on Christmas Eve, the night before Christmas Day, there's no mean feat back in those days. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it was Wobble, but Wobble was fairly new as well. I don't know how long that had been going. I know it started before us. I think that definitely started in '91, because I remember going to the first ones. When Phil was DJing at Notes, if I remember rightly. They said yes. And we were all sat in the office upstairs above Piccadilly Arcade in their shop. They had an office in the building higher up. And we all sat there and, well, what we're going to call it, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I was going, oh, Dr. Nose at Bonds and all the rest of it. We were just playing. We didn't, you know. And then Dermot Ryan goes, I've got it, Miss Moneypennys. And it was Dermot that came out with Miss Moneypennys. And the rest was history. And I remember, Andy, standing at the side of the dance floor, sort of 6 months in, and me and Jim Ryan looking at each other going, we couldn't believe it. We were just looking at each other going, can't believe that this is still running after 6 months. You know, we were like, you know, we thought people were going to find us out, you know, like, you know, sort of like fudging it or whatever. We really couldn't believe that it was going, and it was going bloody strong, man, you know.
I'll just say very quickly, and I'll come straight back to you. Hi, Steve. Steve Carroll says, notoriously difficult to get in unless you had leather trousers. Unless you had leather trousers and a Moschino top on. But I think that is something that we will address to the Miss Moneypennys guys the next time they come back on.
Because, as you know, Andy, I sort of made a point, because I was being a bit the rebellious anarchist that I was in those days. So if Mick Ryan said, in fact, Mick Ryan actually came into the club one night with a fucking shirt for me and said, "Put that on." I was in there.
You used to do the lights for them, right?
That's right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I remember standing next to yourself and many other guys, Sasha. You know, all the guys at Castro. And I'd be there doing all the lighting, playing it like bloody Mozart, like a keyboard. When I could see straight, anyway, at least. Yeah. But, you know, as you know, Andy, it was a very interactive thing. You know, whoever would be there DJing, and I would, because I've got a knowledge of music myself, and a lot of the records you guys are playing, I've got myself. You know, I knew where the break would come in, or I knew which bit would go with certain lighting. You know, so I could play that with the music, so it was all in sync.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it worked really well. So let's come back and find out some more tales about the club itself and some of the highs and the lows, because there were definitely plenty of both. Jez, your perception of clubs, I'm going to generalise now, clubs like Miss Moneypennys, clubs like Wobble, the Steering Wheel, onwards to God's Kitchen, onwards to, you know, whatever. So many of these things that also help to cement Birmingham as really quite influential in the progression of the house music scene. Give me your thoughts on that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wasn't a massive. I was not a house fan, or, you know, I wasn't a clubber. I would, you know, move around different scenes, but using the money.
In retrospect, sorry to cut you off. In retrospect, in hindsight, looking back on how, and you know, how important it was, even though you weren't necessarily part of it yourself.
Oh no, massively important. Sorry, I was going to just come on to that, because you don't need to have been in that scene to recognise, you know, the individuals and the clubs and the promoters who have done it. I mean, you've mentioned the Ryans. I mean, you know, what the Ryans have done for club culture in this city, and still do, you know, is incredible. You've mentioned, you know, Oscillate with Bobby Bird, you know, and Scylla, just absolutely amazing. Higher Intelligence Agency, just fantastic. I mean, I love, you know, that really gave birth to that whole Mosley electronica. So it's not even just the night. Sorry?
Goosebumps thinking about it.
Yeah, so it's not even just the night, is it? It's the effect that they have on. And, you know, we've got, you know, people like Tony DeVitt, Steve Lawler.
Who actually taught me to DJ, by the way. He actually taught me to beat match.
Who, Steve or Tony?
Tony DeVitt.
I mean, you know, hardly celebrated in this city. I think that might change. Like you mentioned, the Q Club, you know, nights like House of God or Atomic Jam, Kitchen, Sunday Central, Moneypennys, Chuffs, you know, Wobble and Crunch, the nights at Slag, at Hush. You know, I'm not someone who went to these places particularly. I know about them.
Procreation, Third Eye Ball.
The Bubble Club. So you can name all these nights. You know, so partly, actually, just to go back a little bit, partly it's the building. So when Justin was talking about Bonds and, you know, the old MEB building, and it had a sprung floor. Partly it's to do, you know, with the building itself, where it's located, the sense of, you know, how it's laid out, how it's built, that allows these things. And the Q Club's a great example of that. You know, that huge central hall, then all the, you know, 30 odd rooms off it that you could do different things. You know, upstairs, you know, so the floor would bounce. So some of it is actually the layout of the club that just lends itself to a particular scene music. I used to go to the Mermaid, anarcho pub. Well, it wasn't an anarcho pub, anarcho music pub in Sparkhill. They had Asians downstairs. It was filthy, dirty. It was horrible, but it was our place, and it was just absolutely suited that particular grindcore anarcho scene in the mid '80s. So sometimes it's a little bit of serendipity. Places just emerge. Hacienda's another one, you know, in Manchester. Then you have to have people who've got the foresight to think about, you know, well, what can we, entrepreneurs, I suppose, is the better way to think about it. What can we do with this club? I was fascinated just listening to Justin say, you know, and I think Dick was saying this as well on the last show. Didn't really know what he was doing. So, you know, either DJing or opening a nightclub didn't know what we were doing, but we're going to give it a go and we're going to fun. We've got a sense of something's going on. We're in that scene. So you need to have that authenticity. And I think the people that I've mentioned and people like Justin and yourself have that authenticity. So that's you got the building. You got the people with the sort of foresight, the knowledge, and then you've got their authenticity. And then you've got a market that, Birmingham needed that. I've heard on the shows before, and it's absolutely true. People who are a bit younger might not believe it, but Birmingham in the sort of mid-'80s, even going into the 90s, was basically John Bright Street.
Oh, yeah.
And on one side, you'd have the town, we call them townies. Yeah. And on the other, you'd have the indies or the punks or the alternatives. And you'd come out at 12 o'clock into the one fish bar. You'd be fighting and kicking all over the place. You'd be looking for the taxis at the end of John Bright Street. You're up at Pigeon Park. And that was it, wasn't it? That was your nightlife. You were either one of them or one of them, and you had very limited places to go. God help you, as you said, Andy, earlier, and again, go back to this sense you said, God help you if you were black or colour. Right, the chances of you getting in somewhere, it used to be the socialist. I don't know if you know about this. It used to be the socialist book club, the Star Club. That was the first place that would allow black reggae nights to be held, and they did it because they were socialist. At the end of Essex Street, it's called the Star Club. And Mike Horseman, who was amazing, did the Shoot Club, had mixed crowds. But other than that, you stayed in Handsworth. And you stayed in Sparkhill, and you were kept where you were kept. But you had, so I've lost my train of thought. So that was it in the 80s. So Pete, I think there was house music and acid house was perfectly timed. There was and of course the drugs, ecstasy played a big part, but there was a real need for different places to go. Mm-hmm. And places like Bonds and Wobble and Sag and Steering Wheel and Tintins and 49ers and to a West End bar. Man, I used to love the West End bar. The West End bar with the 3 layers, man. You could be a rockabilly, which I was. And the house and come out mashed after a night at Bonds or wherever it might be. But there was a sense that people were just exploring and wanted to and were part of something bigger than themselves. Even right, the Q Club was another one. And I think that's my take on that sort of scene. That sort of late 80s into sort of the late 90s, 97, 98. And again, I'll say what I said before, that, and again, this is true everywhere, but there was that sort of mix of cultures and they were on a whole sort of safe spaces, right? So it doesn't really matter what, I'm going to say this now and you'll laugh because of what we've just been talking about, Moneypennys. It didn't really matter what you look like. And that, I'm talking really there about your colour of your skin. It didn't matter if you were a lesbian or gay or queer. It didn't, Twiggy on the door at the Moneypennys. It didn't matter if you were able-bodied or not. These were safe spaces enhanced by, by drugs, but also by the music, by the experience of being on a dance floor with like-minded people who didn't really care about who you were. It was about the moment and being in that space. And Birmingham needed it. Like the rest of the country, I'm not saying it's just Birmingham, but it was needed, and we need to recognise the imprint that these clubs, that these people, and these nights and promoters had on not just Birmingham but club culture. And again, I don't think we quite. It frustrates me that we don't do it, and this is, I said at the start. So I love what you're doing, Andy. This idea about shining that spotlight or giving that platform for people who have contributed so much, but aren't particularly celebrated outside their own circus. And I don't want to. I'll be controversial a little bit, but if you were all from Manchester, everyone be fucking tripping over themselves to talk about you and write books about you and stuff. True. And again, I love Manchester.
We've had people come on and say that before. Sorry, I'll come to you just in 1 second. People have said that on several occasions about the impact and the influence that Birmingham has had up and down the country, and the international brands that we're not. Miss Moneypennys itself is a separate conversation that I'm having with you, Justin. Their persona, their attitude, their approach to so many different things definitely defined an era. Not necessarily musically, but in regards to their outlook towards clubbing. And I'm going to come back to you before I lose my train of thought. Thank you to Victoria, for Steve again, for commenting. Jackie's with us as well. I saw him pop in earlier. I cannot ignore the legend that is Mr. Neil Rushton watching us now. I mean, you know, we talk about Birmingham greats. Come on.
Yeah, I know.
Can I jump in there?
Please do.
I'm not doing it because you've just mentioned Neil. I was swear to God, Neil. I was just about to jump in and say, let's talk, because you just mentioned about the influence. I was just want to talk very quickly about techno. Right? And I don't know if you remember this, Justin, about the Q Club project. But there was a program on BBC for a couple of years or so ago about, I think it's sort of like the Britannia of House or whatever it was. And they started off, the first show started off in Detroit.
Yeah.
Battlefield 3 with Frankie Knuckles.
Yeah.
And then it jumps over to London to Danny Rampling and Pete Tong and about how they went to Ibiza and Thompson. And then he jumped to Manchester and the Hacienda.
Yeah.
And he missed out this big gap called Birmingham and the Midlands.
Always happens.
Always happens. And I'm not just me, I was incandescent. And going back to the techno thing, I knew, because I'd read it. I think I've met Neil once, so we don't know each other. I've met him once, but someone I've been sort of, aware of and his knowledge, and he'll tell the story better than me. But Neil really is responsible for bringing techno into the UK and then out into Europe.
Yeah.
So you've got this sense of Detroit and then Berlin, and Birmingham gets missed out of this thing, and it's because of people like of Neil and what he did, going out there as a record dealer, but bumping into one and Kevin Saunderson and then licensing that we have techno in this country, and then that in itself was responsible for Birmingham techno, the Birmingham techno sound. People like Surgeon and Regis and Rebecca, who are globally known and played to hundreds of thousands of people, and no one fucking talks about it. No one celebrates. No one. And you know what? How can kids today? And this is our old man speaking, but how can kids, if they don't know of the Justin Bonds, the Andy Wards, the Lily Fishers, the Surgeons, the Rebeccas, the Neil, if they don't know about them, right? How can they hope to be influenced and inspired? How can we say to our younger generation, right? You can be like this. They look like you. They talk like you. They live where you work. You can have a career in music because these people did it. And that's what drives me nuts, man.
That's one of the things. And Justin, I am coming to you immediately.
Sorry,
trust me. No, Jez, it's great because it comes back to the conversation that we were having backwards and forwards via text with regards to what we are trying to achieve here is not be the all-knowing encyclopedia of Birmingham history, because there are so many different perspectives that you can tell a story from and hear so many other bits and pieces. So that's why it is important for everybody to be able to get their message across. One of the small little things that I'm very passionate about is a small little venue, unassuming venue that I used to be heavily involved with, called Marco Polo's. That doesn't get a hell of a lot of press when you talk about the history of Birmingham, and yet there's so many things spawned from Marco Polo's. I was resident with Scott Bond there. I was resident with Steve Lawler. I was there every Sunday from open through till close, and then Madders needed somewhere to go at 3:00 because he was so fired up he didn't want to go home, so he thought, you know what, I'm going to go around the corner and open a club. And that's how Sunday Central was born. All of these little things. Not Marco's can't claim any of the success for Sunday Central, but it is part of the story. Do you know what I mean?
I was actually going to get onto Marco's, to be honest, Andy, because it does play a massive part in the Birmingham house scene for sure. I mean, the sheer figures of people in there, right from the off, when you opened in the morning, there'd be people queuing up outside there, waiting an hour to get in the bloody place, because you obviously had the time lapse back then, where you couldn't, you had.
Sorry, I'm just going to blow me on. I'm just looking at. I was just checking the Birmingham Music Archive, and the little entry for Marco Polo's is, the first line is, people can debate, is probably the most important venue for house music in the city. More to do with the attitude and vibe at the venue than for any legendary night, cited by all the main players in that scene as being pivotal in the development of house in the city. It was by the Rag Market, which would hold a few famous raves of its own. It's now so there is a little bit there, Andy, on the archive that I run, but we need more people like you to go in and fill those gaps in and tell us about the things that you did. Sorry, Jay, I interrupted again. Sorry.
No, mate, that's fine. That's fine. It's nice.
What we're going to do, we have so many different people who want to come in and tell their story, tell their timeline, and then what we'll do is, over the course, because we've got weeks and weeks, bring them back. So we had Jim Ryan and Lee Fisher together. Next time we'll have Lee Fisher and Neil Rushton, or we'll get Neil Macy to come on. You mentioned Rob Johnson, we'll get him on. So many different names can come on, and then just without trying to get it down in black and white over the actual timeline, we can just have more of a conversation, this is how it's going. We're an hour and 4 minutes into this chat, and it's flowing beautifully. I know we've still got lots more to discuss, so anyone that is with us, thank you for being here. People watching the recording, thank you. Feel free to comment, feel free to share this if you think we're mentioning anything that your friends would like to hear. So let's come back to you then, Justin. And so we covered about how the club began, without being too specific about month to month and event to event. Tell us about some of the crazy highs and lows that you recall, and the many refurbs. It died a death. It was reborn on many occasions, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we only ever had one major refurb. I mean, when we opened the club, it did look really nice, but the main look of the club downstairs was down to the specific nights that were in there. Miss Moneypennys had great production values. They hired props from the BBC and stuff. And we had two really good dressers there. One was a guy called Des, who started off with us in the early days, and he'd come in on every Saturday afternoon. He'd be there for hours putting up drapes and making the place look nice. And then when he went on, we had a really good guy called Paul Greenaway. I don't know if you remember that guy. And he took on from there. But also my mum used to do all the flower arrangements as well. So whenever there was a chuff, and we had the big, we used to have the big halls and stuff, these various venues, my mum would go along and put up these huge sort of floristry, ornamental kind of things, and they'd be hanging from the ceiling and stuff, So Bonds, after literally 18 months of thousands of people coming in and out the place, did look a bit ragged, to be honest with you.
Only 18 months?
Really, yeah, really. It didn't wear that well, mate, to be honest with you. I'm sure maybe when you was DJing, some of the teething problems we had was the amp room was downstairs in an uncooled, for want of a better term, cloakroom, which was next to the stage, if you recall. And for some reason, I'm not sure, I could never get to the bottom of it. The smoke detectors were wired up above the dance floor. Now, you may or may not remember this when you DJ'd once or twice there. You DJ'd there a hell of a lot more than that, but did you ever play and the sound would cut out and the fire alarms would come off and the lights come up? Did that ever happen to you?
I can't remember. Not that I recall, no.
It used to happen a fair bit, to be honest with you. And that was down to me pushing the smoke machine for far too long. And every so often, the sound would cut out automatically, because of regulations and stuff. The lights would go off, and everybody looking at me going, "You fucking dick.
You twat."
Yeah, you fuck. Yeah. You've done it again, Justin. Highs. I mean, it was such a euphoric time. And as a young guy in my 20s, I never thought it was going to end, and I'm sure you was the same with, with the DJing and, going about and everything you've done, you never thought it was going to end. Do you know what I mean? But obviously everything does. Mm-hmm. Specific, sometimes the guys that came, the clubbers used to make it, some of them used to make real efforts, to look really individual. There was this one guy that came the one night. There's three people in particular I remember standing out over all the years. There was this one guy that came in and he was dressed like a vampire. And he got up on the podiums. Remember the podiums in front of the in front of the podium? And he got up on the podiums, he put his arms out like that, and he had these bat wings underneath. But he didn't stop there. He had some kind of spring-loaded something or other. And he must have pressed these things. They shot out, and he had these bloody bat wings like Batman that must have been about 7 foot across. And he was waving them around across the dance floor. That was an interesting one. And then another guy came in the one night.
Are you sure he actually had something under his arm?
I hope so. That was one. That was interesting. We had another guy that wants to come in as a toilet.
Right.
And he had a toilet seat around his neck and a lid on it, and he had toilet roll hanging from it. There was another, Richard Cotters. You know Richard Cotters?
Yes, yes.
He came in the one night, right, with about 50 blown up bags, right, tied together. He'd blown into these bags and tied them up. And he was going up to people saying, "Would you like one of these?" Oh, what the fuck's that? He goes, "It's a bag of hot air." All the hot air you're talking, take that away with you. You know, there was that one. And then, of course, there was Philip Salon that came in a couple of times with Boy George. And he was just fucking out there, man. He still is, you know. And he came in, I think one time he came in, he was completely wrapped in Tesco bin liners, looking all new romantic, but in bin liners. And another time he came in Tesco bags. You know, he'd made these amazing costumes out of like
way before he out Gaga. Way before
that, yeah. But I mean,
gosh.
Philip was responsible for the Mud Club in London, you know, so he was very big on the new romantic scene and stuff. You know, so,
well, I had a residency at the Mud Club for about 18 months, so I've got several Philip Salon stories.
Yeah, I bet some bloody eye openers in there.
Yeah, just one or two.
Downsides. Obviously, you know, various clubs and stuff have had deaths in them and stuff. Now, we didn't actually have a death in the club. I can't remember the young lady's name at the time, and I do apologise for that. There was a lady that came in to the club, and she was having trouble breathing, etc. And the staff got her outside, and that's because the ambulance station was down the road from us, literally around the corner, just off Centre Lane. So we managed to flag an ambulance down, and they took her off to hospital, but unfortunately she died in hospital over the course of that weekend because she had a hole in her heart. But of course then the press and the media, it was all over us. Girl dies in box, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. And we were it, basically, with the media and so on and so forth. And that was a particular down, because obviously attendance sort of went down and stuff. But we got over that one. And I suppose, I mean, I'm moving forward quite a few years now to New Year's Eve 2001. And we had, as you know, we used to do very, very successful soul nights as well at the R&B.
Yeah. And
they ran for years, and they ran very, very well. It was very nice, you know, unlike some of the venues that, you know, used to put nights on. I know you know the scene, so you know where I'm coming from. But you know, everybody was always really respectful in the club, and they were happy to have a really good soul club in Birmingham. So you know, it was respected and people behaved, etc., etc. But unfortunately, the one night, and it was the night that hit the national press. It was New Year's Eve, and we had a soul night on. I think it was called Soul City, and it was the night that the two girls. There was the shootout at Newtown, the hairdressers.
Yeah.
That actually started at our club, and basically the doors got rushed. A bunch of guys came in, balaclavaed up, started shooting at the ceiling and all the rest of it. People were running for their lives all over the place, running out the front doors, and then they were running back in because there were cars going up and down the streets, pop shotting at each other, like Starsky and Hutch hanging out the window, firing off at each other, and the bullets were going into the walls and everything. So overnight, that was it. My dad was in Steelhouse Lane, Scotland Yard were in Birmingham within probably 2 hours, 3 hours tops. My dad, New Year's Day, was in Steelhouse Lane, you know, trying to give his side, you know, what's happened, what do you know, and all the rest of it. I can't remember. I think I may have been there. It's quite hazy, to be honest, obviously, because of what actually happened. And people were scared to come to the club, you know. I'd like to get onto fuel as well at some point, but this is what finished Bonds for me. And basically, so people stopped coming to the club. I mean, obviously, it was in Hockley, it's right on the border of Newtown anyway. People thought we were mad when we first opened it. What the? We do open the club on the border of Newtown, do you know what I mean? But it worked. I think initially people came there, probably maybe with Wobble, I don't know. I mean, I went to Wobble because I love the bloody music. It's a great venue. they had really good DJs on, more diverse than ourselves, to be fair. And I just loved that venue. But I think people initially probably, same as with the Hacienda, I know we used to go to Hacienda because of where it was. You shouldn't really be going there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Who knows what could happen? But yeah, you know, people sort of like got put off, they stopped coming, and we spent a significant amount of money on refurbing it that year. You know, we had all these big double tanks and put in VIP lounges, loads on leather.
Yeah, Jeff was saying he helped you with all of that. He helped get all.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he did. Yeah. I think he got the old paintbrush out, Jeff. Nice one for that fella. Yeah, he did help us with that. Yeah. I mean, my heart had gone out of it by then, to be honest with you, Andy.
Well, you said you wanted to mention fuel. Also, we had some big. I say we because I was there. Some of the slag parties, infamous night where I remember Black Pat, may God rest his soul, was a little bit worse for wear, and he fell over into the glass.
Pat,
in front of the DJ booth, and that went everywhere. So
I remember that night very well. Yeah. I mean, there's no one completely forgot about that. What a brilliant night that was of the bank holiday. Weren't they brilliant nights?
Yeah, well, Jeff was saying your birthday parties were legendary. Of course, Moneypennys was the one that put Bonds on the map. I don't think it's unfair to say, but also the bank holidays, the slag bank holidays were insane.
They were insane, and we had Peruvia as well, which was a night that was
yes.
And that was also a very, very good night. Great production. The music was slightly more northern. You know, but also, yet again, very, very good night. Lots of glamorous, you know, people making the effort. But it was rather short-lived for a number of in-house reasons. It could have carried on, to be honest, but there was a few little niggles, shall we say, between us and the promoter. So we parted company on that one. But Fuel... now, if you ever get the lads on, they may correct me, but Fuel, as I recall, was born from a night that I ran on a Friday, which was also very successful. It's called Boogie Down Brum. Jez may probably remembers Boogie Down. I don't know. You may not have came.
I remember it, yeah. I think I might have come to a couple, yeah.
Might have done, yeah. So I started. So when Moneypennys, we had a bit of a drugs bust, to be honest, and Moneypennys, obviously, and understandably, they decided to jump ship to protect the brand and went to the church on Broad Street, which later became the Moneypennys thing. And so they went off up there, and we were left with essentially a fucking empty club. You know, so we still had bills to pay, etc. So myself and a few friends, Boogie Dave actually, got our heads together and we started a trip-hoppy sort of breakbeat hip-hop drum and bass. It was a mishmash of all of those sort of breaky songs, a bit of electro, that kind of stuff. And we started that off. It started off as a party, a one-off party. It was in the penthouse at Bonds, which was the upstairs room, as you know, Andy. And it was a roaring success. And my dad said, well, do you want to do it again? So we thought, well, let's stuff it, why not? So we started running it. It just got busier and busier and busier, and we were drawing in people from like Nottingham, further afield, Stoke, Stafford, Sheffield, all over really. Guys at the time, the Medicine Bar was still only open till sort of like normal, sort of like pub opening hours. So people from the Medicine Bar would come up, Adam Regan and co. Adam used to play there with us a few times. I played with Adam a few times. Cy Jones used to play. So we got a real bond with the Medicine Bar guys over that. And it became a really, really successful night. And Ravi and Barry came to see us, and they ended up doing the smaller room in the upstairs for us. I think it was a birthday party or something like that. And they got a lot of people in. So we said, look, you know, carry on doing it with us. Anyway, as Boogie Down Brum got a lot bigger nationally because of that whole big beat scene of the time, you know, Skint Records, the whole Fatboy Slim thing and whatnot. You know, we were getting bigger guests in, you know, we had the Rocksteady crew come along, Hard Knocks, a lot of guys from Skint Records and whatnot. We ended up moving downstairs. We moved down because we just could not keep it upstairs. It was just too big. And then Fuel started upstairs. And we was running Boogie Down, and they were upstairs, we were downstairs, blah, blah. And then we did a Boogie Down New Year's Eve. We filled the whole club with Boogie Down drum. We had Richie March, Bentley with the Mace, and Mike. They used to come and DJ for us regular as well. And they came and played and whatnot. And we did the New Year's Eve there. Anyway, I can't remember what happened. Boogie Down just stopped almost overnight. In the January of '99, which was the year my mum died, actually, and my head wasn't on it, and I took some time out just to, you know, I pissed off abroad for a while and whatnot. So I was getting heavily pissed off and whatnot. So my eye just wasn't on the board. You know, I took some time out, and it just fell apart. Sam Candle, who was our one partner in it, went off to join Sankey's Soap in Manchester. He now is part of the Warehouse Project, which is a very successful venue in Manchester, so he does that. Boogie Dave knocked it on the head. Carl Madden retired from DJing. He was our other partner. And so it just fell apart. And then Fuel came in and took over the Friday. And it was basically, the way I see it, was a cheaper alternative to Miss Moneypennys. So it was the same music as such, but it was more on the funky house side of things, because at that time it was 2001, was it? 2001. That sort of funky house thing started coming in, didn't it, quite big. And they came and did that, and within a few short weeks it was heaving. But the thing was, it was kind of detrimental to Miss Moneypennys, and I hate to say it, it really took the shine off Moneypennys, because you had the same level and quality of music from basically resident DJs. Guys like Brett Ski, Dave Aldershaw, and some of the other guys who forgive me if any of you are watching. I can't remember.
There's one sitting in front of you.
Oh, God, yeah, Andy. Yeah, but you were big time anyway, Andy. You were one of the big time boys, mate. I'm trying to give some of the other guys, you know, a bit of props, you know. So it was everything that Moneypennys was doing on a lesser scale. The production wasn't in there. I mean, we had revolving signs and whatnot, but it was fundamentally delivering the same or similar music style to not such a strict door policy. So people who maybe wouldn't have got into Moneypennys or didn't want to even try and get into Moneypennys, that were going to maybe the Wheel or wherever else to get their fix, started coming to Fuel on a Fridays, you know, Andy.
Jeff's throwing his name in the ring as well, of course.
Of course, Jeff, yeah. I mean, Jeff for me is really synonymous with Moneypennys, because Jeff was always, pretty much every Saturday night, stood by me at the console with our good friend Colin. You know, so Jeff was always part of Miss Moneypennys in my head. But Jeff was really pretty much one of the residents of Fuel. You know, and I think that's really, I mean, Jeff will probably type it. For me, that's where Jeff really sort of started to make a name for himself as a DJ, was probably more Fuel than Moneypennys. Although he did play Moneypennys, he was always playing Fuel, you know. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it was £6 in. We did cheap drinks. Moneypennys didn't do cheap drinks. I can't remember how much it was into Moneypennys because I never paid. But it took the shine off Moneypennys, and Moneypennys really did start to struggle from it. So, you know, we didn't gain 2 good nights. We swapped one for another, which was a bit of a shame, to be fair. You know, but Fuel was a bloody good night for quite some time, you know. And the good lads were having it. You should get them.
I've spoken to them, because then the story continued after that. With myself hosting a room for them at Bobby Brown's. Okay, so Jez sitting listening.
Fascinating.
Intently. It is fascinating, isn't it? It's a story, a timeline that I'm more than familiar with, and many other people will be familiar with as well. And it's difficult sometimes when you are so heavily involved with things to underplay, if that's the right word, the significance of it. We've covered this tonight, but just how important it has been. Just I don't want to focus on it too much, but Justin brought up an interesting point there about the troubles that they had that one very infamous New Year's Eve. And it's quite funny actually, because that was part of the catalyst for myself and my wife moving over to Spain, because when things started to get a little bit tricky there and we just brought 2 kids into the world, my wife didn't feel didn't feel comfortable in Birmingham, and so she wanted to, it made her start to think about the future, and having two young children in a city with that kind of thing going on. And we were quite close to it all as well. You couldn't not be being in the music industry. There was people around us that we knew and whatever. So it was a little bit too close to home. The point I'm getting to, do you feel that whereas in the late 70s and 80s, Birmingham, the racial community within Birmingham, it all came together? Have you ever noticed that when it did start to then become quite more polarized across the cities, the postcode wars, the issues and things like that? Is that a big part of Birmingham history?
Yeah, if that's directed at me, Andy. Yeah,
yes, it is. Sorry, Jez, it was.
It goes. You can't separate that from the social realities around you. And in Thatcher and the decimation of communities of the working class, really, whether you're black, white, Asian, the working classes, there was austerity, job losses. I think and partly that was House was a reaction to that. Actually, it was that escapism. But as you entrench that over one or two generations, second generation, third generation, it hits hard. It bites. And I think the issues in Birmingham, like any major urban city, was reflected within the polarization, the fragmentation of our society. The working class got poorer. We have now have an underclass. Education was worse. I think the decimation of the youth services, which were a critical role for people in terms of their music education. After school you could go and there'd be decks there, or you might have a guitar, or you might put have a disco on, as we used to call them. As even if it wasn't about music, just somewhere to go that was off the streets. That was safe. I think all these things go hand in hand. It sounds daft, but the selling of council housing, all that sort of me generation, or that that conservatism. It's all about me and not the community. Impacted, and I think the things that we saw that you've mentioned in terms of Charlene, and I forget the other girl's name, Shakespeare, wasn't it? Charlene Shakespeare, and the shoot. I mean, those things. Look, they've always gone on. There's always been crime. But I don't think it was ever, or it hasn't been as perhaps as in your face as it has been. Going back a little bit with Bergen Johnson's, and now going through to a real polarization and real fragmentation across the city. And this is a very odd thing to say, but one of the big issues that Birmingham faces is that it's something that you can't control. If Pakistan and India go to war over Kashmir, it's really going to affect Birmingham because the amount of Pakistanis and Indians we have that live here. So there's geopolitical things that go. Now this is far removed from music, but it affects all that culture. Did
you see the thing on the? This is just something that's popped into my head. It was on the American news about they were talking about no-go zones in Birmingham and things like that. I think it was around Alum Rock and the likes.
It was.
It was, yeah. What was it? What did he say? It's because of Muslims. It was a no-go zone. I can't remember the headline. It was a really odd headline, but that's the reputation that sort of cities get, and there's a demonization and there was a racism around those sort of tropes, and which is getting worse. You see Johnson and the Tory government just lying barefaced. You see people like Brasilia in Brazil. You hear Viktor Orban in Hungary and Putin in Russia. There are these strong dictator types. Trump, obviously, there. They all play out. We don't ever. They're too bigger things to think about, but they play out in the things that we saw, particularly in 99. I didn't realise it started in Bond Jez Collins. I mean, absolutely terrifying. But you see that things happen at the Q Club. You've seen things. I don't know the name of the club now. Just on the edge of the Geordie Quarter. It's not called Prism. It's by the end of Summer Row. There's a whole bunch of shootings going on there. There was a club in Bristol Street. So I think you're right, Andy, that those sorts of when you work in a cash environment, you're going to attract into the door staff and stuff. You're going to attract elements of society, and there'll always be that. But to demonise the black community or the Asian community or white community, I think which the media does, is particularly pernicious. But it's definitely taken shape. And very last thing I'll say on this one, I did a project around grime music, working with one of the few youth centres that's still going in Kitts Green, actually, the Pump. And Levi's put a music studio in there, and Mist went down there and performed, etc. So you got this youth club. We did a project around grime, the history of grime. So going back all the way through to the sound system, saying to the young kids, grime didn't come out of it. Go and learn, understand your history and heritage of the sound system, garage, blah blah, all that sort of stuff. We had an exhibition at the Custer Factory as the end product, and there's about 140 kids there. I think Vital was doing the chairing as a grime MC, and we just did a straw poll, and I think it was like 97% of these kids, right, who come 10 minutes, 20 minutes on the bus, had never been in the Custard Factory, didn't know it existed. And I was absolutely mad. I was like, why? They said, well, it's not for us. We can't get the bus because we've got to go through different postcodes. Yeah. And I kind of knew this sort of thing, but it's real. Yeah. The core. And if that's happening, where are the people? Where are your punters in 5 years' time for city centre clubs? You know, if they're too scared to get on a bus from Tile Cross in through to the Custard Factory because the postcodes, and then they don't even think that area is for them. It all plays out. So in a long roundabout way, I'm absolutely agreeing with you that these sorts of things all play out, and it all affects, in terms of where we're at with clubbing. I think acid and house music, and the particularly around ecstasy, I think the drugs are very important in this story. And I think the move away from ecstasy into more coke, ketamine, the different type of experience that you're having. And I think again that sort of plays out. So I'll throw it back to you and see what you think about is the history of sort of house clubbing, or whichever derivation it is. Because I do worry, and particularly COVID, I'm not sure if it's the same, if it'll change, if it's, it has gone forever, if you'll ever get that mix of people in those places.
Well, they're talking about that. Everyone's saying about, we're going to come back to after Prohibition days, and it's going to be glory, hallelujah, and it's all going to be fantastic. But time to see. But I think now we're steering away, and this is a whole different conversation that we'll have another time. I think a whole different topic on that that we can pick up on. I want to come back to Justin and yourself, Jez, because I'm conscious of the time for both of you and for the people watching as well. Justin, again, part of a story that we will have to sit down and capture more. But tell us about then the slow demise, because with clubs there are always a slow demise, aren't there? Tell us about the slow demise until the doors actually closed at Bonds.
Well, as I say, I mean, up to the point of that dreadful thing happening on that New Year's Eve, things were still going very, very well. People loved the club. They loved the music that was going on there. It wasn't just a Saturday night thing. It certainly wasn't just a Friday night thing. Other things were going on throughout the week. Various things. We used to do a lot with the various universities, colleges, small little club nights and stuff. We'd do things upstairs and stuff. So it was very, very healthy.
And Constitution Hill hadn't started to be redeveloped at this point, had it?
That's actually a very good point, and you've just reminded me of something there, Andy. The reason that the venue was actually chosen just brought me onto that. So thanks for reminding me. The reason that Dad decided upon that particular space was not only because it wasn't a ready-made by any stretch of the imagination, but it did have a bloody good dance floor in it. It was working. The shape of the building was just spot on. We saw the council's future plans for that area, which was at the time, typical Birmingham Council, as Jez will know, was supposed to have taken place in 5 years. Within the 5 years of us actually getting that building. And they were talking about getting rid of St. Chad's and pedestrianising it, and tree-lined walkways and parks and stuff. They were originally going to be doing that around St. Chad's. But obviously that now has become East Side, and that's where they put the park and all the rest of it there. So it's actually moved. And they have pedestrianised St. Chad's and whatnot to a certain extent. But at that particular time when we took the venue on and to turn it into a club, it was because they were talking about putting, other things there, and making that.
So it was it was an out-and-out investment, basically.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And we got planning permission to build apartments there for when the eventual demise of the club were to take place. We had planning permission in place to build apartments on it. Anyway, what happened, and we did try and put various other events on. Some worked, not to any great, not to any sort of like major thing, So we had certain events going on, and we just couldn't. I mean, Carl and Barney came and did something there, like a cream style thing, and we did a couple of months of that, and it didn't really do that well, to be honest with you. It was more that the also rans. People had been out having the mash all night and just couldn't go home for whatever reason. So it wasn't very clever. Right. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't particularly what we wanted. And so that went on for a bit. Various people tried various things, but we just could not pull it back, and we spent a hell of a lot of money on refurbing it, which we lost. And we went into 2003, January 2003. And what actually happened was, because we rented that building and we had the option to purchase it from the MEB at a certain figure. Anyway, the deal that we'd done with certain things happened anyway that I don't particularly want to go into, because there's no hard feelings or malice or anything like that at all. But basically what happened was Jim, Mick and Derm and Lee ended up acquiring the building, which sent my dad into absolute heat. Do you know what I mean? And the guys, to be fair, they came in to see us and they said, look, we want to carry on working together, Moneypennys, Bonds, blah, 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 but we want to be partners in this, all of us together, And I think my pops at the time, I think I did as well to a certain extent, we felt sort of cheated. We felt it was slightly underhanded, well, very underhanded at the time, and so on and so forth. And we carried on. And basically, essentially, we were paying rent for the venue that we couldn't fill to the Ryans. And it just got to such a sorry state of affairs that we couldn't pay the bills, we couldn't stay open, and they took the building up, and we moved on. We then opened a venue in the Arcadian, which was the old Slug and Lettuce, if you remember that, on Thorpe Street. And we did that with Jimmy Hill and his dad. And that was the year I got married, and my heart just went out of it, and to be honest with you, I just had enough. I was very disillusioned. And I took a break out of it, and I left the venue that we'd opened up in the Arcadian. Got married, settled down, blah, blah, blah. I was living in Bearwood at the time, then moved back over to Moseley, had a kid. And then obviously, because I was living back in Moseley, I started promoting events in Moseley. I was doing the Bull's Head. I was putting on raves at the skate park. Mm-hmm. I did the first ever all-night rave at the Jog of Ale. I think it may have been the only ever one, because I think it closed down about 2 weeks afterwards as a result. I was putting on little parties in video shops, Cinephilia. I put a party on in Cinephilia, a cheeky little acid house affair. So I started doing loads of little bits and bobs, and I went to the Hare and Hounds and worked with Adam. I did stuff with Adam at the Bull's Head. I then started doing quite a few things at the Rainbow and so on and so forth. Then I got involved with David, as you did yourself, I believe. So yeah, I mean, that's what happened. I stopped promoting. I promoted my last event at the Custard Factory in 2016. That was the last event I promoted. However, I've been in talks with a good old friend Trevor Fong who's a very well-known, renowned DJ. And we are looking and in talks at the moment about starting very small niche, irregular, Balearic style events, but not in Birmingham. Not in Birmingham. We're looking sort of further afield, sort of Shropshire, that sort of area.
Okay.
Just for 200 people to come along, have a nice time. Get guys from the Birmingham scene who can play across the board, and other people from around the country. And we're looking to do one around Easter time. So I'm getting back into it.
Okay. Well, you'll have to keep us up to date with that. We'll give it a mention here. You work very hard in pushing things that you're passionate about. Your passion, your passion continues. There's no denying that. A very, very creative person with your design work and everything that you're involved with as well. So which we'll touch on just before we end. So Jez, if you rewind your mind all those minutes ago when we were talking about the the new sound of Birmingham, the new scene in Birmingham that you feel so what's the word I'm looking for? Not confident, inspired with. You have a lot of hope for what lies ahead from the rich heritage that we've laid the foundations for.
Yeah. There's you put me on the spot now to think about bands, but if you think all the way from like Laura Mavola to Sanity, Lady Sanity, to Lady Leshurr, to JK, to Daps on the Map, to bands like Jaws Piece, Swim Deep, Novus, the Claws.
You're reading off names to me that I have absolutely zero idea about, if I'm honest, mate.
No, but why would you? Why would you? Kezia Soul. There are. The point is, I think you can list names, but they go. Someone like Zoza Cole. There's a big London jazz thing going on, right? Which is through Shabaka Hutchins and the TRC Centre, and it's amazing. The Comets come in and Urja Collective. Shabaka's at the middle of it. Shabaka came to Birmingham when he was 16, and he got his musical life through going to the library, and he couldn't believe, he came from Bermuda, I think he was, couldn't believe he could borrow all this music and just absorbed it all. Soweto Kinch, who's one of our, one of the great UK jazz saxophonist. I love him, and he mentored Shabaka. Now he's mentioned Zoza. So you got these, just on a little jazz thing. This thing that's going on in London actually has its seeds in Birmingham, and we're starting to see that through. So it's not so much about naming or reading off names. It's just that there is so much musical talent and musical culture in this city. And I can go back to it again because I'm just working with a woman called Bambi Baines. I've just come across her. She's a youngish sort of Asian woman, sings in Punjabi and English. She's got like 3 million followers on Instagram and Spotify. And I've only just discovered her. And I'm not working with her, doing a project with her. She's absolutely amazing. And she's like hidden almost, So these types of people, as like yourselves, exist in this city, right? And if I was younger, I would be out nearly every night. I could go out. I think there's a little bit of, let me get my figures right here. Pre-COVID, there were 136 venues, right, going from the NEC or the NIA right down to a room in a pub, 136 something like that in the city centre. And at any given time, the capacity of gig goers was something in the region of 97,000 people. So less about club music, but more about live music. And so there is this capacity of 97,000 people attending gigs, weekly in the city centre across these venues. And it's incredible to think that that's the case, and that there is, again, as I say, this continuum of music history laid down by people like yourselves, who I'm not saying are heritage because you're still there doing it. And as Andy, you mentioned something earlier, and it's very true that when you're in the middle of it, you don't stop to reflect and think about either your practice or you think about your practice or what you're doing, or, and I say to people like you, what will we remember about you and your contribution in 50, 100, 150, 200 years time? Right, we need to nail these things down. We need to preserve them exactly like you're doing, because we need to have this in 200 years time. What was going on in Birmingham in 1988, 1999? What's going on in Birmingham? What was going on in Birmingham in the year 2000? What year 22? Who are these people? Because we need sort of celebrate our culture, and many cultures, but music is the one I particularly love. And there is so much stuff going on, and there's so much stuff going on in this city. It's incredible, but we don't shout about it, or we don't. I think our industry is pretty fragmented. I don't think we have a coherent, we talked about the Hacienda and how that cohered around Factory Records. I don't think we've really got a strong industry, whether that's about recording studios or rehearsal spaces or record labels. We haven't been particularly great on managers, booking agents. So we need to bring these together. We need to support and nurture that sector, because it brings in, if nothing else, brings in a lot of money. Music tourism in Birmingham brought in £293 million in 2020, supported 6,000 jobs. So there's an economic argument for it, let alone about the cultural thing. And if we grasp that, then we'll have more Justin Bonds, more Andy Wards, more Bonds places, more House of Gods, more Q clubs, more Slags, more Fuels, more all the people that you're talking about. And that's what we should be doing, and that's what the little bit I try and do, from the backseat is try and push that argument and say, look, let's see what's gone behind us, or what's in the past, but use that to inspire the future, because there's a whole range of reasons why we should do it. And just the last thing, Jay, I'm not making the case that you can do, and for you, Andy, as well, but those things that you talked about in 99 and the crime and violence and youth, honestly, music is one way out of that shit, man. You can affect and change people and give them a different path through that. And I've been privy to that with some of the grime people, and it's also important for social cohesion, social reasons.
Well, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be having a conversation with a gentleman that I've known for a long time, who has been very hands-on in that field with the communities, Ammo, and he's also going to be talking, and someone else as well, who's going to be like a quite a special guest that's going to be taking us back even further. So yeah, all of these things, these conversations aren't just about the rave scene, that it is about casting our shadow further afield.
Music crosses, it's about music, but music is a great way in to talk about people, communities, about what, many different subjects. So music's always the anchor, and I've been fascinated to listen to you two tonight. I've learnt loads, but it's the jumping off point to a whole range of different things.
It's funny. You're talking about sort of like nurturing the youth. I mean, when we were doing Boogie Down, there was this young kid called Mike, right? He was 15 years of age, and he brought in a mini disc demo for us to listen to. And we put him on and gave him his first ever live gig. And his mum and dad brought him along to the club, right? And said, look, you can play this gig, but there's no drinking, right? So anyway, this guy, Mike, played this gig for me and Dave. And his name's Mike Skinner.
I was just about to say, I know where this conversation is going.
And well, we all know what happened to him.
What did happen to him? He got drunk and he wasn't allowed back out.
He got kicked out.
Not drunk, got kicked out. No, he became the streets, So
it's vital. It is incredible. And music is, whether we engage in it and perform it or consume it, whatever, music is it's the best art form to engage with people. You can't see it, you can't touch it, but it impacts us. And a whole range of emotions and levels, and that's why I love. I've never played an instrument, can't DJ for my life, but I just love and consume music, and I love being around people like you who produce and entertain and give me emotions. That's why it's important.
I always used to love coming to play at your place with Lenny or John Harris as well. Let's not leave him out.
No, let's keep on out.
Sorry, John.
Well, listen, gentlemen. I want to start wrapping this up now, because we have covered a hell of a lot. There's a lot of information that we've consumed this evening. I'll give you, Jez, an opportunity, please, to let people know where they can find out more about yourself. Very eloquently spoken, very engaging. I've really enjoyed listening to you tonight, and I definitely will get you to come back on again. I think it will flow well. And Justin, definitely you and I are going to talk about sitting down and doing like a a podcast, just to listen, to listen to the story. So, Jez, I'll come back to yourself. Please do let people know where they can know more about you and the product, if that's the right word, that you have out there.
Okay, so BirminghamMusicArchive.com is the website. It's a bit clunky, falling over, but upload photographs and posters and flyers and memories about anything to do with music, whatever is important to you. I don't censor it, except it's your history, your memories should be your voice.
So BirminghamMusicArchive.com.
And there's an associated Facebook group page, Birmingham Music Archive on Facebook, if you use that. Find me at Brum Music Pics on Twitter or at Jez C, and the same on Instagram, Jez Collins and the Birmingham Music Archive. And I'll give a little plug if I can. And we've got a major exhibition opening at the Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery on the 28th of April about the Q Club, which we've sort of touched on today. What we've done, we've made a 35-minute film with some of the people who are responsible for nights like Atomic Jam and Flashback and Space Opera and House of God. We've got a whole range of amazing photographs of people clubbing, raving, but also it was a live music venue, so we've got pictures of Bowie playing there. We've unearthed some photographs of a House of God night by a photographer called Terence Donovan, who was one of the great British photographers, and he came up in '96 because his son Terry was part of House of God, and he took these photographs. They've been stuck in Chris Wishart's drawer in Wolverhampton for 30 years, and we found them. We're going to exhibit them. They're beautiful photographs. Hopefully people might come down and spot themselves. So that's happening 28th of April for 6 months onwards. Okay. Got another exhibition starting in March at the University of Birmingham, which is a public one about popular music in Birmingham, at the University of Birmingham, where House of God and Flashback started in the Cellar Bar. Lots of house rave nights started there. As student nights, and then went off into the city centre. And then I've got
Berlin Bar,
and the Cellar Bar, Berlin Bar. And then we've got a really I can't sorry about it, I can't say much about it, but we've got a really special project starting. Will be announced in February, which hopefully will encapsulate a lot of the things that we talked about today. I'm super keen. It's music related, actually some music that we're producing about Birmingham, but I can't say anymore because I'm under embargo. Understood. But I'll talk about it. Well, so that's
okay. If we may, if you want to remember to come back and invite some of the people on to talk about the exhibition nearer towards April, I'll be more than happy to give a platform. If it's not revealing too much of the information before the exhibition begins, then please bring them on. Is Mo still involved?
Yeah, we can do we can talk about the exhibition whenever. Mo and there's Danny and Jez from Atomic Jam, Chris House of God, Chris McAdams from Bubble Club. Obviously the Ryans.
Definitely bring a couple of them on. We'll have a good old chinwag. Okay, and then Justin, tell us what you're heavily involved with at the moment.
Well, as you know, Andy, I've sort of been dipping my toes in and out of the fashion industry for quite some time. If not my own labels, I've worked on many other designers' stuff. I've worked with Barry Sharp from Duffer St. George. Donovan Love, I used to do a hell of a lot for Donovan Love back in the day when he had that shop, Mostly if you bought anything that was had screen prints on at Donovan Love's shop, chances are I designed it.
There you go.
Yeah. I still design a lot for various labels, record labels and stuff, mainly techno, dance labels. I've worked with recently a good guy called Neil Parnell, who's got a fantastic label called 9 Records. The amount of stuff that they release, and it's quality stuff. It's just unbelievable to me. I just don't know how to find the time to get it all and put it out, So I've been working with him. I've worked with the labels. Another good friend of mine, Mark Cooper from Bedford Falls Players, who used to be with Terry Farley. I've been working with him. But I'm also involved in a clothing company called Future Past, which basically specialises in this kind of junk. Acid House Anonymous. I thought I'd wear that for a bit of a joke, considering sort of like my journey over the past few years. But we sort of sell garments to sort of clubbers, and a lot of it's sort of like harking back to the rave days. So we've got future t-shirts. We actually are we supply all the and design all of the official merchandise for the Hacienda.
Mm-hmm.
So we do that. We've got a deal with Hacienda to design and sell all of the official Hacienda garments. We do those.
So tell us the website for that one.
It's futurepast.co.uk.
Okay, and is that all that, or is that future-past or
future-past.co.uk? But if you just type in Future Past on any browser, it will come up.
It'll come up.
Yeah.
Okay, right then. So as I did say when we started, we have to draw a line under this conversation somewhere. So it's going to be now, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your input. It's been totally enthralling. I'm just going to say a few goodbyes and draw reference to people who have been commenting. Please do come back when you get an opportunity to view a lot of the comments. People who have been chatting and agreeing and reminiscing along with you. We've had great feedback. So thank you both. Thank you both.
Thank you for inviting me. Great to see you, Justin. You're looking fab, mate.
Cheers, brother. Thank you very much. I'll meet up with you in the flesh very soon.
I'll talk to you guys later. Take care. Take care.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So there they go. Thoroughly engaging. Absolutely thoroughly engaging. Thank you all for being here. Let me take a scroll through and give some of you guys a shout out who have been listening intently and commenting. We had Jeff and John. Good evening to Aid, Ed Ryan, Brett Reynolds as well. Hi. Martin Brewster says hi. E-double-D popped in and said a shout out, as did Mr. Gareth Hughes. Jeff has been commenting constantly throughout. So many memories of Miss Moneypennys. Jeff Jefferson, somebody that I met when I was just 6 years of age. I moved from one part of Birmingham onto Castle Vale, which surprised me at the beginning of that conversation. Jeff and I were actually neighbours, living a few doors apart. And who would have known that years down the line we'd be partners in the DJ booth. So Jeff and I are going to have a conversation at some point. Andy Tomo left a message during halftime at the Blues. Emily was commenting throughout. Thank you, Emily, for your points. I did also, if I remember, I saw Victoria in there mentioning Moneypennys and saying what a truly incredible Sunday it was. Thank you, Victoria. At some point, I'm going to be talking to people who were on the dance floor and also went on to do great things themselves. So do feel free to get in touch if you want to come on. And then scrolling down, John Harris says he loves you guys, to both Jez and Justin. Steve Carroll says thanks, it's been brilliant. Thank you, Steve. And Fernando is there as well. Thank you as always for your support, my friend. Brum as fuck, we call it. Next week we're going to have another conversation about Brum, but we're going to be focusing more around north of Birmingham, Warsaw, Wolverhampton kind of areas. I'm just waiting to confirm who the second guest is. So just keep your eyes out. Basically, every Tuesday at 7 p.m, we have these talks. Over the next few weeks, we've got some deeper conversations talking about mental, physical health, talking about relationships. We're also going to be talking just so many different topics that we've got lined up, and we'll also be focusing on other cities. It's not just going to be about Birmingham as well. You can see the graphics on my screen there, Access Crew, and the logos that are jumping up onto the screen. That's a subscription program that I have where people help me to put all of these little tools and videos together. If you want to find out more information about that, go to djandywood.net/access. Otherwise, it would just be great to have you back every week, 7 o'clock. Go and check out all of the library of videos that I've got over on my YouTube. Thank you for your time, almost 2 hours on this wonderful Tuesday. I'm just going to say farewell, and I'll catch you around. Thank you so much, guys.